Welcome to A Canadian Investing in the U.S., a podcast and YouTube channel focused on Canadians buying real estate with host Glen Sutherland.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Canadian Investing in the U.S. My disclaimer is I am not a real estate professional, a broker or real estate agent. I am not a CPA, and I am not a lawyer. All of this information I have found from education I've done, podcasts, and the internet. So it's just basically some information to maybe to sum up and save yourself some time when you're trying to do your own research. What I wanted to cover today, landlord versus tenant-friendly states. So I just wanted to break down the research that I've done on this. When choosing your property, no matter where you're investing, you should be looking at the eviction process, the price to do the eviction process, the time it takes to do an eviction, the vacancy rate, the rent-to-price ratio, which I like to keep around 1 or better, the growth. You want to make sure that you're in a market where people are moving into it. The city is getting larger every year. You want to make sure there's jobs for your tenants to work at so that they can pay you rent. I'm going to go through some of these slides if you're watching this on the YouTube channel. So some of these, the slides are going through. You'll hear that I don't have a lot of reasons to why this is a terrible state or why it's a tenant-friendly state. And that's a lot of it's just because it's come from a list on the internet, and it didn't provide a lot of information. I have went to the state's website in order to get some of the details of the eviction process, but some of them, they still sound pretty good. But it could be that, like, some of them, it's not that the amount of money you can hold as your last month's rent or for damages is really low or something like that. Sometimes, like I said, it's just like that. It's they'll favor the tenant more whenever you have to make a judgment or go to court. Some states, you can do an eviction in just days with very little expense. In some states, it takes a lot of money and takes many months to get them evicted as well. Some decisions are favored more to the landlord. Some of them are more to the tenant. And really the goal to this is to try to avoid getting professional tenants in your properties. Here. Going to go to Maryland first. I'm going to start with my list of tenant-friendly states. In Maryland, they have you can charge up to a 2-month security deposit, and it's returned to the tenant within 45 days of leaving. That's actually a pretty good thing. 45 days gives you time to get contractors in to do repairs, and that way you can charge them the actual amounts that it comes to. Some of the downsides is the tenants can get an order to force you to do repairs. You can file an eviction on the 2nd of the month, but if they pay at any point, you need to start over the whole process. So if you have a tenant that's just constantly paying late, you are just going to keep running into this forever, and there's nothing you can really do about it. If they pay the rent, they can violate the lease by like sneaking a pet in, subletting without permission, painting. So there are other ways to violate the lease besides just paying late rent. It takes a minimum of 3 months to get a tenant evicted in Maryland. And so while you're doing that, most of the times the tenant is living for free on your dime while you pay the mortgage and everything else. Next one I wanted to cover is Massachusetts. So Massachusetts, kind of similar. You can file eviction on the 2nd of the month. If they pay at any point, you have to start over. If the landlord enters the property or harasses you, in quotes, to move your belongings, or they can be fined up to $300. The landlord can be fined up to $300 or up to 6 months of jail time. So there's a nice perk. Next one is Pennsylvania. You can file the eviction on the 10th of the month, but if they pay at any point, you need to start over, which is kind of the theme to these tenant-friendly states. Next, I'm going to talk to you about Tennessee. They have the 2-strike rule in Tennessee within 6 months, so you really can't do anything unless they've had late payment or lease violations 2 times within 6 months. You need to sue the tenant for damages in that state. You can't actually do it in the eviction. And landlords have very little leverage in court. Next one is Vermont. You can file an eviction on the 14th of the month. States that, same sort of things. North Carolina, you have 10 days to pay your rent that's overdue. New Jersey, you can charge 1.5 months security deposit. It's 30 days that they can pay late before you can even start the eviction process. They have to be more than 30 days late. In this state, the tenants have the right to withhold rent if the landlord fails to do repairs to essential things such as heat or hot water. New York, it's an expensive eviction to do it in that state. Same thing, tenants have the right to withhold rent if there is repairs that need to be done. I've also done a little bit of research on New York and found that from city to city, it's actually, they have some differences in the law. Next one, California, another tenant-friendly state. They have rent control in California. Tenants also have the same rights to withhold rent or call safety inspectors if the landlord has failed to make repairs on heat and hot water. You can charge 2 months of rent for the security deposit, and you can only have 21 days to get it back to the tenant by law. Next one is Kansas. I was told to stay on the Missouri side of Kansas City due to the landlord versus tenant-friendly states. I'm, to be honest, not really sure what the differences are, but that's what I've done. And for my properties I'm buying in Kansas City are in Missouri, or they're actually in Raytown, which is not quite Kansas City. Illinois, same thing. Tenants have the right to withhold rent if they have not paid hot water, or no, you've not repaired hot water or the heater. Same things in Washington. Next, I wanted to talk about the friendly states. So let's start with Texas. In Texas, they have fast evictions, so you can get the tenants out very quickly. They are very fast to act on lease violations. They allow tenants and landlords to charge the repair cost to the tenants if it's agreed upon in the lease. Landlords are protected if the tenant decides to sue. Tenants can take landlords to the justice court to receive an order if there's any health or safety repairs that have to be done. And the downside to Texas is really, for me, is just property taxes. Not really what we're talking about, but that's the only reason I haven't invested or really looked at Texas. The next one is Indiana. They have fast evictions, zero tolerance for tenants who don't pay. They're allowed to hold a security deposit for 40 days to make sure that to evaluate any damage that's occurred. Another friendly state is Colorado. You can enter a rental property without giving any notice. They have a fast eviction if the rent is unpaid. Tenant does not have the option to pay and stay. So meaning, like in a lot of the states, if they go and pay you partway through, then you start over. Whereas if you paid late, you have the rights to go through and fully evict on that ground, even if they do pay later. And tenant has 72 hours from when the rent is due to pay their rent. Georgia, it favors the landlord during the evictions. You can start the eviction after the rent is late 48 hours. You only need to give verbal notice of 7 days to start the eviction process. First-time offenders may be able to pay rent late and stay. The second time, it's no, that you can evict completely. Kentucky, they may have the most lenient laws for security deposits. Really, you can charge whatever the tenant is willing to pay. You can withhold security deposits after they've left for 60 days. You can file an unconditional quit notice if they have been late on rent once in the last 6 months, 14 days to move out. Mississippi, The lease can stipulate and hold up to stipulations on keeping the property clean, in good working order, and garbage free. So you can evict if they aren't keeping the property clean. And there's unconditional 14 days notice to force termination. So if you just decide that you want them out, you can go ahead with that. Arizona. They have a fast eviction process. They're able to terminate the lease in 10 days for false information on an application, even after several months that they've been living there. They can hold up to 1.5 months of rent as a security deposit. Must return the security deposit within 14 days, so you have to be pretty quick on that when, let's say, moved out. Florida, another landlord-friendly state. There's no law requiring a lease agreement, no rent control laws. They have a quick eviction, unlimited security deposit, and you have to return it within 30 days, though. You can start the eviction process after 3 days of rent late. Next, we're on to Missouri. Rent must be paid in the first 5 days of the due date. Oh, the negative side about Missouri is they can get an order, the tenants, to force you to do a repair. Alabama. They have a fast eviction process. They can hold 1 month's rent as a security deposit. Has to be returned within 35 days of moving out. You have to give 30 days notice to raise rents or 30 days notice to have them move out. The eviction process can start 14 days after the lease violation. Next one is South Dakota. South Dakota is a security deposit of 1 month. Must be returned within 45 days. 1 month of notice to raise the rent. 3 days to pay the rent before the landlord can evict. The tenant has no ability to stop the process if they've paid late. You can complete the whole eviction process. The tenant can force repairs in the state, so they can go get an order to do that. Montana. Montana has an unlimited security deposit. It has to be returned within 30 days. So you can charge the tenant whatever you'd like for the security deposit. They have a lot of interesting laws in Montana. Some of them here: 15 days to pay the rent or they're evicted, 15 days notice to do a rent increase, 14 days to correct a lease violation. So if they've violated the lease, they have 14 days to fix it, 3 days to correct an unauthorized pet, 3 days to pay past due rent, and 24 hours to fix the problem if they've changed the locks on you. It's a bit of a confusing law because everything's broken down separately instead of having a flat rate for everything. Anyway, let's move on to West Virginia. They have unlimited security deposit in this state as well. It's returned within 65 days of move out. 15 days additional if a contractor is required to make the repairs. That way you can get the exact billing amount to charge to take off of the deposit. Evictions, you need to give written notice, and there's no time frame specified in this state of West Virginia. So the next one is, I didn't put this in my slides, but I have Arkansas in here as well. I did a little bit of research after I already found these slides. And in Arkansas, failure to pay rent is grounds for eviction. There's no time frame. Only required maintenance would be that if you were violating a health and safety code. This is just a little thing. If you just compare the Republican versus the Democrat states compared to the landlord-friendly versus tenant-friendly states, there is a relation. It's not direct, but you can kind of see that they are similar. You'll see that like the blue states tend to be the tenant-friendly states, and the red states tend to be the landlord-friendly states. Although there are more landlord-friendly states than other states, bad tenants are everywhere. Make sure you and your property manager have a strategy for handling them and ensure you choose the best tenant possible. Thank you, everyone, for your time and dealing with the quality of my slides. I hope to see you next episode. Thanks.